It's Tuesday night, so it's Necessary Roughness on the Bite Size Sports Network. I'm your host, John, joined by Nick. Today, we are talking D-line rankings, edge, and interior defensive linemen in 3, 2, 1. Welcome in, everybody. It's another episode of Necessary Roughness on the Bite Size Sports Network. I'm your host, John, joined again by my co-host, Nick. Nick, how the heck are you tonight?
What's up? How are we? I'm
Great
excited.
Hades with us. What's up, Dante? Go
Green is here
Hawks.
too. Talk about some good D-line rankings.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And Dante's in the chat. We've actually also got his rankings. He sent them over in the Discord, so we'll throw those up once we get through ours as well, just to compare and contrast. I also wanted to go through. I mean, once you get it's like all of our positional rankings. Once you get to like 14, 15, you start really splitting hairs. Becomes really preferential. So I do want to at least acknowledge several honorable mentions at each position, just that aren't on any of our top 15s. Still want to give them a couple of shout outs. Before we get into all that, Nick, it's been a bit since we had a chance to chat. There's been a little bit of Buffalo Bills news. First thing I wanted your take on was the Ed Oliver extension. How do you feel about the money attached to that? I know Bills fans are a little hot and cold on Ed. He obviously had huge expectations coming out. He was kind of the next guy in that like Aaron Donald build, you know.
Sure.
That was kind of the tag on him. Similar to how Kalijah Cansey coming out, where it was like, oh, we got this undersized, penetrating D tackle. Is he Aaron Donald? And he had the first round pedigree, but sort of up and down throughout his rookie contract. Gets 4 years, 68 to stay with the team amidst some swirling trade rumors. How do you feel about that sort of APY attached to him? Guys like Deron Payne got 90 over 4 years. So, like he's sort of, I mean, he's below like the real top end of the market. But some people were saying they thought that was a lot for him. So I wanted to get your take.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people said that that's a lot for him just because Bills fans haven't really seen him produce the way that we wanted him to produce coming out of college in Houston. But when you look at the other numbers around the league, as you just said, Payne getting 90, Ed Oliver getting 68, it kind of makes him like B-tier defensive tackles in the league. And that's kind of what he is. That's like, obviously I think he was mocked at like top 5 in his draft class, but then he had that injury in Houston or at Houston. And then he became the 9th pick. I was very excited to get him at the time because it was like I'd seen him like number 2, number 3. I was like, wow, we're gonna get him at 9. Just a little injury, he should be fine. Yeah. And he really hasn't had any injury problems in the NFL, but he also hasn't really made his mark as. It also goes to show nobody's Aaron Donald. Even if we're talking about whoever, it's not. There's a difference between that. There's a discrepancy. I really like the deal just because he's a guy, and I had to think about it a little bit. I was like in New York City when I got the notification. I was like, really? Like we got him back? But now it's like a couple days, removed, and he's a guy that we brought in. McDermott's finally going to be doing the defense himself without Leslie Frazier. I don't think that he would want a bunch of new guys in his system in his first year, fully coaching the defense. So I think it's a good move to like keep one of our own, especially with the additions now of Leonard Floyd and like Von Miller's coming back. It's nice to have some really, really solid talent around a guy like Ed Oliver, and hopefully, he can show up in the big games because that's kind of been his Achilles heel. He's been good in the games that don't matter as much, and then in the games like Cincinnati where they had like 4 out of the 5 offensive linemen out, he wasn't able to do anything and penetrate any pressure on Joe Burrow, and like that's a game that we nearly needed him. So I think that it's kind of like we're kind of just remembering that playoff game and him not doing anything. You have to like look at the whole big picture, and he's done a lot for this team. He'll probably continue. He's still very young. He'll continue to get better.
Yeah, Green 80 saying 17 APY. Draymond Jones got 3 for 51. So same APY,
Yeah.
of course. I think a similar caliber player. I think a lot of people expect, maybe when you think about like the draft investment, maybe that's a little warranted. But when you sort of zoom out from that and just kind of think about him as a player, I think a lot of people kind of expect that full package, like the way Aaron Donald's able to stop the run at his size while also being an insane pass rusher. Ed Oliver is a pretty good penetrator, but like who would have thought the Bills would miss Daquan Jones so badly when it came to stopping the run in the playoffs?
Yep.
And I think you can assign that blame however you want, but I feel like a little bit too much of it goes to Ed Oliver because he's like a true 3 technique, right? He's not your guy who's gonna sit there in 2 gap and really be able to stymie a good run attack. He kind of does need a Daquan Jones beside him. So I mean, it's market value probably to keep him around. You know what I mean? And they probably just weighed that against just not having him at all, which feels like a lose-lose essentially. But yeah, I was interested to get your take on that because I've seen Buffalo fans sort of on both extreme of the spectrum as far as the Ed Oliver contract goes. And then they signed Leonard Floyd to mix into that edge rotation. It's a relatively deep edge group already, with Vaughn obviously fighting some injuries here and there. Gregory Rousseau really burst onto the scene, I feel like, last year. You still got Boogie Basham, another early round pick at edge for them, same class as Rousseau. And AJ Epineza, the class prior, is sort of starting to come into his own as well. He was top 10 in get off over the course of last season. And he's a bigger edge, kind of more of like a true 4-3 edge setter kind of guy, but great acceleration off the ball. And I think, working with guys like Vaughn, now you've got another experienced guy like Leonard Floyd in the room. You've got a deeper rotation, and those younger guys will have a ton to learn from those two. How do you feel about the Leonard Floyd signing?
Yeah, I loved it. This is a move. You wake up and it's like Leonard Floyd. I mean, that's kind of a big one to see, just a 1-year, $9 million contract. It's an obvious move for a guy like him who sees his team kind of going in the wrong direction, and he sees that Von Miller's over there, who I really played really well with, won a Super Bowl with, in a situation where they have a chance to compete for a championship every year with this team chemistry and talent on this on the squad. A guy like Leonard Floyd, he can play alongside Vaughn. He can play when Vaughn's off the field, when he's they switch up a little bit. The thing about what the Rams were able to do is with Aaron Donald is they were able to only have Donald rushing while Vaughn and Leonard were coming from the edges. But with a guy like Ed Oliver, as you said, they were going to have to bring in a guy next to Ed, which means that we can't rush as many. So we have to have Vaughn or Leonard. We can't really have both at the same time, but that's totally fine. If one of them gets tired, you bring in the other. I think it's a really good tandem there. Obviously Vaughn has the ACL that he suffered on Thanksgiving, so he'll probably be out for the better half of the first 5 or 6 weeks. So we'll really see Leonard start to start the season, and it should be really good. I think that bringing in like a Super Bowl chance, somebody who's been dominant, he's had I think 9 or 10 sacks in the last couple of seasons. He's really coming to his own. Now he's at age 30. Not really worried about the the number of 30 there because he's only here for a year. So, I mean, and Vaughn's 34. So, I'm excited to see what Leonard's got. He's going to obviously have that chemistry with Von Miller straight away, and I'm excited to see what he brings to Buffalo.
Yeah, and he can cover a little bit too. Probably more of like a true outside linebacker, similar to the way Von plays. So you can mirror your defensive calls, and to the point where no one knows where that pressure is coming from. If you have both of those guys who you can effectively drop, as opposed to having Von opposite of Gregory Rousseau, where you're probably just leaving his hand in the dirt. So yeah, I like the flexibility that brings to the team as well. Speaking of defensive line talk, Nick, we're going to get into your edge rankings first. And a disclaimer. Myles Garrett's on the list. It was just just a bit of a
the glitch.
Just a bit of an oversight, a glitch in the system. We'll blame it on the graphic guy. I don't know if James is in the chat, but we'll just blame it on the graphic guy. Nick has Myles Garrett in his top 15.
Yeah,
he just wanted to make sure he gave Uchenna Nwosu and Zach Sealer some love. So we'll figure Myles Garrett's somewhere in that top 5. But Nick, I'll let the people know exactly where you've got him.
Okay, so yeah, TJ and Myles are like the number 1 and 2 guys. James goes, it's my fault. TJ is number 1 in my opinion, the sack king. He just really came on I don't even want to say he came on last year. He's just been such a beast that he deserves that number 1 spot in my opinion. Mm-hmm. And it also has to do, in my opinion, of like the team. I don't think, TJ has been such a vital part of each defense that Pittsburgh's put out each year. Myles Garrett, he's an unbelievable talent, like a top 5 defensive player in the league. But, these defenses of Cleveland have kind of been suspect. And I don't know. It's just I just thought TJ should be my number 1 this year. Then Myles is 2, so we're going to move everyone down. And then Zach Sealer, sorry so much, my bro. You're going to be 16. Where you got a chance to come into the top 15, I guess, this year. And yeah, so we're going to go Myles Garrett, as I said, unbelievable player, just not number 1 this year to start the year. And then Micah Parsons, who's, I guess, now completely changed to be a defensive end or edge, whatever. Hassan Reddick really came into his own in Philly, and I'm just so excited to see him continue to ball out with all these Georgia Bulldogs that are coming in. Max Crosby's been a stud. Von Miller, as a Bills fan, it's a little biased because I've also seen him in at 11 and 12, which is totally fair. But I still think that he's got that burst, and I still think that he has that championship pedigree that makes him a top 7, top 6 guy at his position. He's a Hall of Famer. Yeah, Dante makes a really good point there. And exactly, yeah, you know what? And exactly, every single time that he's out there, every time TJ Watt's in a game, they're in the game. So he's a completely different. They're a completely different team when he's on the field. Then we got Brian Burns, who initially he came in the league a little bit of a tough start, but now he's just an absolute stud. Then we got one of the Bosas. We got Joey, Charger, stud. He's been there for he's been there his whole entire career. He's been a top 10 guy his entire career. He's been unbelievable. Matt Judon had an unbelievable first season for the Pats last year. I should know. And then Zadarius Smith, Daniil Hunter, Sean Gary, those guys are all interchangeable, in my opinion. You could have any of those guys at 10, 11, and 12. That's just the way I put them. And then Hendrickson for the Bengals, Nwosu for the I think it's the Seahawks. Is that right? I'm not.
Yep.
And then Zach Sealer, he'll be at 16. But for Miami, or what team's he on?
Yep.
Yeah, it's Miami. Yeah, he's a beast too. He really came into his own last year too, and I'm excited to see what he does because now with the addition of Jalen Ramsey, when he gets pressured the quarterback, that could be some picks for Jalen Ramsey. So, yeah, that's my top 15. Zach is going to be 16, but I really like the top 5. I think is pretty solid. Vaughn could definitely be more in that 10 or 11 spot, and then Zadarius, Daniil Hunter, and Rashawn Gary, those guys are all interchangeable. I think that those guys are all pretty elite players. So yeah, that's my top 15.
Yeah. It's a good group. Pretty similar to mine. The order probably shakes up a little bit, but let's see, pull mine up here. And I had a pretty. Oh, this is yours again. Nice. I had a pretty similar thought process when it came to Myles Garrett in particular.
Yeah.
So I went Nick Bosa 1. I just think that he's so. I mean, one of my favorite things to watch about Nick Bosa is if you just look at the Niners D-line pre-snap and you just look at how like he looks like a jungle cat.
I definitely had Bosa in my top 5, by the way.
He was 3. He was 3.
For me?
I knew. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Maybe 4. He was in there. I saw him.
Okay.
But I went Bosa 1. Like he just looks. That's the best way I can describe it. He looks like a jungle cat out there on the edge when he's at the line. Everybody's in their 3-point stance. Everybody's low to the ground. Everybody's bent, but he just doesn't look like a person when he's getting ready to jump off that ball. He's another guy who's top 10 in get off. He has every move. He has the speed to power. Oh, here we go. Here we go with the Seahawks agenda. That rookie tackle duo is sick. I'll give you that. But yeah, I went Nick here. It's kind of just one of those things where I feel like he has a gear that very few other people do. Definitely in the conversation for Defensive Player of the Year last year. I think he'll be right there again. And he is just my favorite edge to watch. So it's definitely a little bit of preference there. I went Micah Parsons 2. I'm sort of taking last year and what I think this year will go like and combining those two when I'm putting these together. And I also so Nick Bosa isn't quite like these two guys, but with Micah and TJ Watt, the reason I had them ahead of Myles Garrett, I just feel like they can affect the game and dictate the game in a much more versatile way, in a lot more ways than Myles Garrett can. I'm going to be excited to see Myles Garrett with a guy like Zadarius Smith opposite him this year. I mean, he had Clowney. Clowney in the NFL, more of a run stopper, not a ton of polish. So I'm going to be excited to see what he can do when you're not able to just key all the way in on Myles Garrett on with one side of the offensive line. If you're not doing these full slides, what can he do if he garners a couple more one-on-ones with Zadarius, with Dalvin Tomlinson rushing from the interior? He's got a lot more help than he's ever had. So he might have a huge year as well. 4 is the lowest I'm comfortable putting him. I went max 5. I think we had that in common. Sort of underrated, I feel like, by a lot of people just because of the down year the Raiders had.
Yeah, it's on the Raiders. Yeah,
it's on the Raiders, but captain of that defense. Really, really interesting story if you read into Max Crosby at all. Just the way he came up and then got into the league. So I'm a big fan of his, but he's got every move in the book as well. He's gotten to be a much better run defender as he's become a little bit more veteran here. And yeah, just a guy who, without him on that defense, it would have been a lot uglier. He absolutely changed some games last year. Judon, I've got 6. Yeah, I mean, he was right in that Defensive Player of the Year conversation for the first half of last season as well. He's been excellent since getting to New England. Showed a little bit of promise in Baltimore, but once Bill Belichick got his hands on him, he just took it to a whole new level. Him and Josh Uche are a great duo. And I think, he's sort of buoyed that defense along with a guy like Kyle Duggar, and then all these scrappy man corners. They don't have a ton of talent on this defense, a ton of high-end talent, I should say. But between Judon, Kyle Duggar, and then all the Joneses that are so sticky in coverage, I've said it before, but when you play New England, the Joneses keep up with you. And I've got Hassan Reddick 7, poorly utilized early on in his career in Arizona. Gets to Carolina. I think he had 15 sacks in Carolina before they moved on from him. And then it seemed like a little bit of fool's gold at the time, I feel like, because the way he got to the passer seemed a little gimmicky before we saw what he did in Philly this last year. He was so effective when he got – and again, when you're on that Philly defensive line, kind of how I was saying with Myles Garrett, now that he's got a little bit of help, it's such a stacked group that you're getting one-on-ones all over the place. You can't afford to sell out to stop any one of these pass rushers because they're so deep. So that helps his case with just his pure sack numbers, but his pressure rate was fantastic. His get-off's fantastic. He has a bevy of moves that he goes to. And I really like him. I've got your boy Vaughn at 8. I think he'll bounce back just fine. The bend might not quite be there. We're probably not going to see Super Bowl MVP Von Miller bend again. But he's such a savvy guy that I think he's still going to win pretty consistently. I've got Joey Bosa at 9, one of the best run defenders at the position. And, of course, he's got plenty of pass rush moves. Rashawn Gary at 10. Here we go. Rashawn Gary, respect. Just a unit. He's pushing 275. Ridiculous arms. His biceps, upper arms are probably the circumference of my waist. And the guy's just a tank. His bull rush is incredible. He's got great athleticism to bend the edge. Brian Burns, one of the best spin moves in the game. He's sick. Speaking of spin moves, I have to give an honorable mention to Alex Highsmith, who has a sick spin move. He's been working opposite T.J. Watt for a couple seasons now. It pained me to keep him off this list, but maybe next year. Lee, you're exactly right. That's what helps him a lot because he doesn't have a ton of – I mean, he's pretty hefty, but I think more than his strength, his length allows him to make first contact with that tackle. And that's the case with a lot of these guys, but Judon in particular, you're right. I've got Danielle Hunter at 12, scary neck injury, but he came back last year and seemed like just about the same player. If he never had that injury, we might be talking about him as a top 5 type of guy. He's got that type of athleticism and the God-given talent. Just unfortunately has dealt with some injuries. Another guy who's dealt with some injuries is Zadarius Smith. We'll see how he does in Cleveland. Came up north and threw some purple on just to sack Aaron Rodgers a couple times, and now he's out. Trey Hendrickson I've got at 14. He was a great free agent signing by Cincinnati. You remember they moved on from Carl Lawson and brought Trey Hendrickson over from New Orleans off a 15-sack season for the same amount of money. And you were like, well, what's Cincinnati doing? I mean, he's not quite as proven as Carl Lawson, not as high of a draft pedigree, and it worked out for him and then some. He was phenomenal in that Super Bowl run. He was great again last year. Sam Hubbard is another guy who probably deserves a little bit of consideration in that top 20 to 25 tier, but he plays opposite Trey, and they'll have a great rotation this year. And then 15, I had to give some love to Danico Autry. I think he might be the most underrated player in the NFL. You're probably familiar with the name as a casual NFL fan. Maybe not, though. But even some of the bigger NFL fans, I think, underrate what Autry brings to the table. A lot of times he'll come from like a 4-eye. In that odd front Tennessee will run, but when he's out at edge all the way, he is an absolute problem. He's one of the biggest reasons that front has been so effective. A lot of the glamour went to Harold Landry. Of course, it should be with Jeffrey Simmons as well, but a lot of that went to Harold Landry and Bud Dupree, when Autry, I feel like, is one of the real engines of that pass rush. He's solid against the run. He has a really deep bag of moves, and he's been doing it for a long time. just not the flashy kind of guy, and maybe hasn't had a huge stage on which to perform, at least in recent years. But he's really consistent, and I had to include him. Before we move off of edge, Nick, feel free to jump in with any other guys you wanted to at least bring up. I also wanted to mention Josh Sweat. He's been fantastic for Philadelphia. Just part of that rotation. He's a cog in the machine. Doesn't get a ton of the recognition, I suppose. Hassan Reddick had the Defensive Player of the Year consideration last year. Obviously, they keep dumping first-round picks into that front. So maybe a guy like Jordan Davis comes to mind first. Obviously, Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham. But Josh Sweat is a guy who's been consistent since he got into the league. He's been improving steadily, and he was one of the better pass rushers in the league last year. Brandon Thorne of Trench Warfare. If you don't follow his Substack, I recommend it. He does some great work with Duke Mayweather. And what they'll do, he's an offensive line guy, but he'll analyze the quality of sacks. And he has spreadsheets he puts together that are really, really cool to see. But he basically rates the difficulty or the quality of a sack, whether it's just, because you just look at sack numbers, that's an easy thing to do. But he'll break it down and say, hey, 6 of Hassan Reddick's sacks were high-quality sacks. And Josh Sweat was high up there on the list, where his sacks, he was actually winning and getting to the quarterback. They weren't clean-up sacks for the most part. So it sort of weeds through those things and qualifies the quantitative sack numbers, which I think is really interesting. Any other edge rushers you wanted to at least mention as part of this smattering of guys?
Well, what I realized just now is that Zach Sealer is a defensive tackle, and I think that graphic guy messed up again because I said I wanted Mac for 15. And then
Khalil Mack, that damn graphic guy.
Yeah. But
that's all good. Because
I just realized, I was like, I thought because when you said, can we mention anybody else, I was like Mac, and I was like, I'm pretty sure I mentioned Mac in mine.
Yeah, Khalil Mack.
Yeah, so Khalil Mack would be my 15, and then Sealer's my 15 for the defensive tackle. So.
Oh, that's what it was.
Yeah,
Jalen Phillips is another guy.
He's going to be in the top 15 this year.
Yep. In Miami, yeah. Bradley Chubb, maybe. But yeah, it's a really interesting group. Guys, this is really awkward. So
okay.
We'll jump to D tackles here, and let us know down in the comments below if there are any other guys you think deserve some love in the edge group. Oh, this is exactly why. Yep. So Khalil's on here.
Yeah. Well, that's gonna be
what it is. That's what it is. All right. Flip those.
Yeah. So pretend Khalil Mack's not a defensive lineman, please.
Yep. Just a classic flip flop. So Khalil Mack, 15 on the edge. You got Zach Sealer up here right behind Zach Allen. Talk a little bit about this top 5 here.
And then also Sealer's not on my list because Myles Garrett's on my list. So,
exactly.
So he's technically not on the list.
Yeah.
So so for it's the undisputed number 1 champion of defensive lineman is Aaron Donald. Yes, James, we should be in on the same office. It would be a lot easier. Or at least
rent the space, man.
Rent the space, man.
Equidistant from all of us across the 50 states.
So I'm really I was really impressed with what Dexter Lawrence was able to do last year. He's just solidified himself into that top 5. I guess, you can always bring up another name like Quinn Williams, Cam Hayward, Derek Brown that could be in that number 2 spot. But for me, Dexter Lawrence is he's a stud. He's a beast. Don't know what to say. He's ridiculous. I mean, he came in the league and it was like, I could see, listen, it's hard. It was hard to see right away that like a giant pick was going to be good because of how poor they had been doing with the draft picks. But that was a home run. They got a good one. Then Quinn Williams, Jet. So we have a Giant and a Jet, which is very interesting for me. But yeah, he's also just an absolute just tank. Cam Hayward's been in the league forever. He's doing the same thing every year. Derek Brown, just when the Panthers got him, I was like, oh my god, like what a huge man, So yeah, he's been a beast. Christian Wilkins, really scary guy from Miami. He's just gotten better and better. Watching him in the AFC East, Buckner, always has to be in your top 10. Jeffrey Simmons, we just talked about him. Hargrave, we talked about him with the money, with Ed Oliver. He's just Hargrave. I can't believe the 49ers let him go to Philly. I mean, that was a really bad decision in my opinion.
Philly to 49ers.
Or Philly to 49ers, my fault. Yeah. I can't believe that happened.
That was wild.
Yeah, but I guess Philly's done fine since then.
Yeah, they stayed deep. That's for sure.
They have a pretty good defense, but if they have Hargrave, that'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Jonathan Allen, I got two Allens, right? So Jonathan Allen, Zach Allen, those guys have just been beasts. And then Washington, Leonard Williams. I mean, so we got Leonard Williams, we got Quinn Williams, we got Dexter Lawrence. All these guys have been coming in like the New York City area, just really making a name for themselves in that interior front. DJ Reader, man, like DJ Reader starting. Is he still with? Let me just look it up real quick. Is he still with?
DJ Reader has my favorite highlight from last year.
Yeah.
And it was literally just him getting absolutely ripped off the line. And you see, I mean, he's an absolute sack of potatoes. Like he's wide and he's rock solid. He's rotund. But there was a play where the center crossed his face and they were trying to kick him out towards the left side of the offensive line. They were trying to kick him out and run off the A gap to his left. And the center crossed his face and he just he ate the contact. Yeah. His whole upper body got pulled out of the gap. And then he you see his legs just stick in the ground. It looks like he's about to break in half. It doesn't look like he should be this flexible at all. But he just completely reverses it without it just twists his hips basically and reverses it, takes his whole torso, pulls the guy back, mucks up the play, stops it for no gain. It was the coolest thing I've ever seen. I'm gonna try to find it so I can maybe post it on Twitter, bite-sized Twitter or something like that. Now that I'm mentioning it, but I'll dig that up. It's one of the greatest things I've ever seen. DJ Reader stopping the run, rushing the passer. He's so sick.
And just an absolute incredible pickup for Cincy because when he was on Houston, he was creating problems just like that. But then he goes to Cincy and now he's on a contender. I hear Trevor, the Chief fan over there in the comments say put respect on Chris Jones's name. I didn't know he changed his position to DT. I always thought he was a D end. So I think that D ends are different than edge rushers. So if we're doing this on D ends, I definitely put Chris Jones in the top 3. But I didn't know that he changed his position to DT. Apparently he did. So
yeah, he's back. He went to true edge for last year or the year before last, I suppose, when they just had nobody there. I think it was a Frank Clark injury.
Clark injury, yeah. So that might have been my mistake as well. Obviously, Chris Jones is a stud. And then we got Dalvin Tomlinson, Zach Allen, and Khalil Mack. Or not Khalil Mack. So, yeah, not Khalil Mack, but there we're going to put Zach Sealer, who's actually in this list, just not on the other list.
So we're just a classic flip-flop.
Yeah, so Dalvin, Zach Allen, and Zach Sealer are 2 Zachs in the list. So, yeah, that's my top 15. If Chris Jones is, in fact, a DT, he's obviously in that top 5. Then we'd have to move everyone down. But I thought he was a DN. So, yeah, I think it's a decently solid list. Maybe some names are interchangeable.
Yeah, for sure. Don't worry, Trev.
We're not disrespecting your boy.
Don't you worry.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
We've got you right here.
There you go.
So I'm going to go. Oh, don't you worry either.
Oh, you got him too.
Yeah. Yeah, so I went Chris Jones 1. So I talked about that get off stat. I heard this on Move the Sticks with Daniel Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks. It was, however they calculate it, next gen stats or whatever. They calculate that get off. There's a stat like time to hit, how long it takes you to get to the quarterback, essentially. And a lot of those guys on that list are, it's a Nick Bosa, a Hassan Reddick, these lighter edge guys, the real athletes. Number 2 on that list, the second fastest get off in the league is Chris Jones at 300 plus pounds.
Wow.
From the interior, can do it on the edge. I think he's sort of eclipsed Donald by this point. Aaron Donald's still great in his own right, of course. But I think that page is finally turned over where we can have that conversation anyway. I don't think he's the undisputed champ at defensive tackle anymore anyway. And then I was right there with you. I've got Dex at 3. He dominated the playoff game against my Vikings. He took Garrett Bradbury and Ezra Cleveland and Ed Ingram to the absolute woodshed. It was unbelievable. And the speed and acceleration with which he moves at his size blows my mind. That's why I needed him above, a guy like Quinnen Williams, who was in Defensive Player of the Year conversation at one point. He is just a different animal when you see a guy who's that size, but you also don't need to take him off the field for passing downs because he can put pressure on the quarterback. He's a dream for the modern NFL. He's got the size to 2-gap on early downs, where you're not going to be. I mean, you can sit in too high and still be effective against the run without safeties in the fit because Dexter Lawrence can just eat up space. You got a Leonard Williams next to him. That's a really good front that the Giants have, and that's about as low as I was comfortable putting Dex. Quinnen at 4. I've got Jeffrey Simmons at 5, who's ridiculous when he's healthy. He just got a big old bag as well. DJ Reader at 6 for me, for the reason I just mentioned. I saw him do that, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna watch some more DJ Reader, I think. And I'm just in love with the way he plays. Similar thing to Dexter Lawrence, where huge size, able to 2-gap in the run game, but also to pressure the quarterback. Jonathan Allen at 7 for me. That was a tough one between him and Cam Hayward. But I went John Allen. Cam we might see a little bit of regression from him this year, potentially, but the same thing's been said the past couple of years. I think this will be his age 35 season, if I'm not mistaken, and he's still playing at a really high level. I like Kenny Clark. I think I don't know if I'd call it disrespect, but I think at a lot of times he's kind of forgotten by a lot of like national talking heads. But he's one of the best true nose tackles that we've got in our game. Christian Wilkins can affect the game in a lot of different ways. He's been awesome. Grady Jarrett, another guy who, might not get as much love as he deserves. I saw a list that had Grady Jarrett at 24, I think it was, like mid-20s, and had his now teammate David Onyemata at like 11, and I was like, whoa. But that's another guy who probably deserves a little bit of mention anyway, is David Onyemata. Vita Vea at 12.
Yeah.
I mean, he's probably top 3 or 4 if we made this list like right after the 21 Super Bowl against Kansas City.
Yeah.
He's another one of those guys who can get to the passer at an immense size. I love the no gloves. He just looks like an old school badass defensive lineman. DeForest Buckner, just branches for arms. Really interesting archetype of interior guy. Uses his length to win on the inside. Javon Hargrave, 14, been one of the most effective interior pass rushers in the league. And then I like Grover Stewart at 15. Deron Payne should be in here somewhere. And maybe it's as high as like 12. So I want to give him some mention, but I went with Grover Stewart kind of for the same reason. Like, I feel like a lot of people forget about Grover Stewart, another true nose tackle, playing alongside a guy like DeForest Buckner. He doesn't do any of the flashy stuff. He's a lunch pail guy, and maybe once I think Kev might be joining us, we'll see. But I've got a couple of his Colts here featured. Here we go. Bears rookies, full bias. Yeah, Bears should be interesting anyway. Who was it they got at oh, Nate, help me out. I really liked the it was Zach Pickens. They took another interior guy though. Zach Pickens just gets obliterated in the run game, but he should be an interesting penetrator. I'm trying to think of who else that was. Pulling it up. Oh, Javon Dexter. Yes. Javon Dexter is going to be good. My favorite pick for you guys is Tyreek Stevenson. I think he's going to be sick. Any other interior defensive linemen? Yeah, it's Dexter, Nate. Any other interior defensive linemen you want to at least mention as part of this exercise? I think I got all the names out I wanted to.
Yeah, no, I think that you did. I definitely forgot Grady, Vita Vea, and Kenny Clark. I love those three guys. So yeah, I kind of missed on those three, but I think that we both, we touched on some interesting guys that maybe some people wouldn't have in their list, but yeah, for sure, Chris Jones would be like in that 1 or 2 spot that I missed. I just thought he was a defensive end. And then Dexter Lawrence, man, I'm just so excited to see him play for the Giants this year again because I just think the sky's the limit.
Yeah, I hate to like that team, but I do.
Right. Yeah, especially because they just bounced you. Yeah.
Dante, are you still in the chat? Do we have a Green 80 here? I might pull up your rankings if you are. Otherwise, we'll just kind of talk it out. Let's see. Yeah, and then let us know down in the chat who you think at least deserves some consideration. Maybe they don't crack the top 15, but who else deserves to be up there? What do you think? Poona Ford? Who else we got down there?
Poona Ford, yeah, I love that.
Yeah, you guys
Poona Ford, man.
You guys can bond over Poona. Well, cool. Green 80, we'll pull your rankings up as well. Another bite size. I'm showing all our stuff. Whoa, those are exclusive documents. Give me a second here. We'll pull up yours. Another bite size affiliate. He'll be starting to pump some content out with us pretty soon, I'm sure. And you've of course heard from him on this show. Might see him next time he joins us. He sent me a
get his camera working.
Nice new camera he's got. Vita sort of fell by the wayside last year, I feel like, but definitely has the talent. Here we've got your edge rushers. So you gave Sam Hubbard some love. I like that one. Montez Sweat at 9 is a fun one. He is good. He gets really underrated too, I think, being opposite Chase Young. And he's kind of that fourth guy on that D line. Like, he's kind of like the Ray Edwards. I don't know if you guys remember the 09 Vikings. He's kind of like the Ray Edwards of that unit when you've got
we all remember that.
Jared Allen and Kevin and Pat Williams. And then you've got Ray Edwards, who's good, but he's kind of just there. I could see Sweat having a real breakout, especially if they move on from Chase Young. But he's been really good when he's been healthy as well. That's sort of the story of that entire defensive line for Washington. If they can stay healthy, it projects as one of the best defenses in the league on paper. But things sort of haven't clicked. So that's an interesting one for sure. Anything else jump out at you on here, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, like the DeMarcus Lawrence, I was really thinking about putting him in there.
That's a good call.
Right, I like that call too.
Cam Jordan's a good call. He deserves some mention at the very, very least. He's been doing it for a long time. I like Vaughn over TJ is certainly a decision.
Yeah, no, sorry.
That's wild. But yeah, this is a good list too. I'm glad you have a couple of guys that don't overlap with ours, just so we can give them a shout out.
Yep.
Yeah, that's all right.
What do we count Calais Campbell as?
He would be interior defensive line.
Okay.
But that's
and
a
maybe
good
at like 16, 17, something like that.
Yeah, like he's probably in that next tier. Mm-hmm. He's one of those guys too who you're just like, why the fuck? He's 36, he's 6'6", 300 something, and then you see him pull off this quick twitch move where it's just like, oh my god.
He is a bona fide trooper, trailblazer of the sport at this point.
Green 80 would put him in the old position group.
Yeah,
that's true. But he's just one of those guys who hasn't really. I mean, his snap count might go down a little bit, but when he's on the field, you're right. It's just same old shit. Joey Bosa too high. I feel like we all had him kind of around there. Something like that, but yeah. All right, let's jump to.
I can't agree. Yeah. Anyway.
Let's jump to the interior defensive line rankings for our buddy Green 80. So he's got Aaron Donald up top. Oh, Trevor.
Where's Chris Jones? Oh,
Trevor. Light him up, Trev. No, this is an interesting one too. So he's got Deron Payne at 3, and it was when I saw your list, Dante, that I was like, I need to find a spot for Deron Payne. And then I whittled it down, and I was like, I'm gonna throw some other guys up there, and give Deron Payne a mention. Grady Jarrett, pretty high as well. Jordan Davis, I mean, if Jordan Davis is probably in this top 15 conversation in the really small sample size from last year, right? We saw their run defense fall off an absolute cliff when he went down with his injury. And we are projecting a little bit with this. This is kind of a 2023 or I guess 2022 season roll into 2023 season ranking. We're right in the middle there. So he's got Jordan Davis and Fletcher Cox 6 and 7. So yeah, Fletch. I mean, I don't even think we mentioned Fletcher Cox. He was really close for me. Just as we sort of project, I could see him fall off a little bit. Big Payne fan, yes.
Yeah, no shit.
Definitely. Derek Brown at 10. So you guys both gave Derek Brown a little bit of love.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Jeffrey Simmons being at 14.
Jeff Simmons 14. James, where are you at?
Yeah.
And then I like the Zach Allen love too. He is pretty underrated. I mean, probably less so now that we saw the payday he got. But that's a good call, sneaking him in as well. So you mentioned
names, though, man. It's a good list.
It's a good list. You definitely mentioned a few guys I wanted to at least bring up that were escaping me. Fletch is a good call. You got Jordan Davis and Fletcher Cox both in that. I mean, if we're no, you're good, James. It was a group effort.
The thing about Jordan Davis being at 6 is what I like about it is that this is kind of like a 2023-24 list more than a 2022-23 list. You know what I mean? Like he has the opportunity to be there, at the end of this season or maybe in the middle of the season. Maybe we don't put him there after last year, but this is like a dynamic rating type. Like he could be there by week 6. Like Jordan Davis is having a beast of campaign, and now he's in the top 10 all of a sudden. So I like that pick just because, he has that opportunity to be there. He's like right on the brink, and he's just a mountain of a man. I really like him at Philly.
Mm-hmm. And that's what makes this so tough, man. Like, I feel that way about like 8 through 23. Like when you really start to whittle it down in that area, it's like, oh shit, let me just pick who I kind of like and want to mention, or pick somebody who I want to say something about, pick somebody who I feel like might not be on other people's lists right now, just so we can talk about them a little bit. But that's how all these sort of are. And I've mentioned on all these shows too, we're gonna circle back and do some tiers, and break this down in maybe a little bit more palatable of a way, just because when we're splitting hairs with so many of these guys, these are extremely talented players, have massive effects on games, and are hugely impactful for their teams. So it'll be interesting to when we get to tiers, it'll be interesting to see, where do you split them off then now? Who's in your tier one? What is your tier one? What qualifies for a tier one guy for you? So we'll get to all that once we round out these rankings, but we'll be talking. Let's see, we've got corners, safeties, linebackers left. I guess we could do tight ends. We could do linebackers and tight ends. And then we'll do corners and safeties. Corners and safeties, let's do next week.
Yeah.
I was going to do the opposite, but we'll round out with tight ends and linebackers. So let us know before we jump out of here down in the comments below if you have any questions for us regarding any of these guys, anything about this position group in general. Something I also want to do this off season is get to team rankings for position groups, which I think will be a really fun way to contextualize this stuff. And then as we start to project out, talk about our team predictions, we can sort of weigh all of those things. And once we get to that, then we can sort of, once we compile those lists, we can sort of compile like a team rating for each of us, which I think will be really cool. Once we tier that off, and then here's an interesting one. Corners and safeties, aka Seattle. Yeah, it's gonna be a good secondary out there, man. That'll be fun. Lee with another good take on these guys. Yeah, these are the real difference makers. You're right. Question from Trev here. Do you put Will Anderson in linebackers or edge?
Edge.
Does he sniff the top 15 without stepping on the field? I put him at edge personally. I want to see it. I want to see it at the NFL level with him. He's not quite like, if we're talking prospects, like I think I would have been more inclined to put a guy like Myles Garrett in the top 15, 20, 25 before stepping on the field, just because he has all of it from a physical standpoint. He was the textbook 6'5", 270, speedy, bendy, strong. I think you need to really have, like, Will Anderson is probably a blue chip guy for some draft analysts, but I think there's a little bit of a size concern when you talk about bringing him into that real upper echelon of pass rushers. And he also doesn't have this. He has great speed, great get off, but it's not quite elite for that position. He has great play strength for his size. And they played him farther inside than I think anyone will at the NFL level. He's probably getting every snap from 5 tech out at the NFL level, but he played plenty of 4-eye in college, was asked to contend with some guards in the run game. And I worry about him in the run game at the NFL level just because everything gets ramped up. You're getting some mean-ass tackles trying to kick you out to the edge. You're getting some mean-ass guards who are going to pull and trap you when they're trying to hit the B gap. Like it's a different ball game. So I want to see it from him, and I could see him having a huge year. I could see, particularly under D'Amico Ryans, I think he's going to put him in the right spot consistently. But that being said, I really want to see it at the NFL level before we anoint him to that upper echelon. But like if we went all the way to like 40 or something like that, or let's say 32, he might crack the top 32. Or if you're talking 64, like all every team's 2 edge starters, he's immediately in that conversation for sure. And I think, once we see a little bit of NFL production, we can talk about that. I mean, 85 pressures in a college season is nuts enough. But again, he had all the advantage of being on the Alabama side of the ball when you have all these 5-star prospects to contend with, that you're not able to key on him as much. In Houston, I think they'll really be able to. So not only will it be, the NFL transition, I think he's going to see a lot of double teams as well if he does prove to be a legitimate pass rusher at the NFL level. Not a ton else going for Houston in that department at the moment, but not quite yet. And he might drop in coverage a little bit, but I expect D'Amico to essentially slot him in as a true, a true edge in their 4-3. Or their even front. Maybe they'll do the 4-2 nickel. And he's probably a wide 9 as much as possible. And he gets somebody else to set the weak side edge. But we'll see what happens with him. I really liked him coming out. I think it was prudent of D'Amico and that front office to just take him at 3 after trading up, because there was the buzz about, I'm drawing a blank on his name, the other edge kid out of A&M. Holy shit. With the no. Nick, help me out. Who the hell is that kid?
You're talking D lineman from Texas A&M?
Yeah. See, this is what happens when you just like, all right, draft's over. I can turn my Tyree Wilson.
Oh, Tyree Wilson.
I was so close to saying Trayvon something.
Walker?
Just Trayvon Walker. Yeah, just because of Walker. And then I was like, no, his name is like that, though. Tyree Wilson. There was buzz about him shooting up draft boards as edge 1. I think it was the correct choice to stick and pick, take Will Anderson. He'd been edge 1 for 2 years in this class. So I'm excited to see what he'll do.
Yeah.
Let's see here. Okay, that's one we already looked at. Cool. Well, yeah, we're going to do secondary next week. We're talking corners. We're talking safeties. We're not going to delineate from outside corners to inside corners at all. But we might do a special little list for, those true slot guys, the Kenny Moores of the world, the Mike Hiltons of the world. Just to show those guys some love, because they probably won't sniff our cornerback rankings in the top 15. But that's an extremely valuable position at the NFL level as well. And then safeties, it's just going to be safeties. We're not doing strong and free, just because things are so malleable and positionless in today's NFL. So stick around for that. Catch us next week, Tuesday night, 9/8 Central. Also this week, we've got Trevor, who posed this question. We've got him on tomorrow night doing a best ball draft. So join the comments for that. Join him with that exercise. On Thursday, we've got the Bounce. They'll be talking NBA Finals, which are heating up. We've got the Heat and Nuggets tied 1-1, going back to Miami. That's a really fun series already, and those guys always come with it. So Friday, I think we're off unless Trevor's got Rumbles of Red. We'll definitely have game reactions to NBA Finals games. We'll have a Game 3 reaction live, I'm sure. We'll have Biting Early Friday this week, Friday morning this week, if I'm not mistaken. We may have a late night Bites sprinkled in. We'll have some short videos and things like that up on the channel, up on the Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So stay with us in there. I don't think I have the link handy, but we'll drop it in the description if I find it. But you can also join our Discord if you like talking ball on Tuesday nights. Why not talk some ball with us all week? Where me, Nick, guys like Trevor, James, Green 80 right here are talking shit all week, throwing tweets in the chat, giving our reactions, and talking everything sports from football to basketball to NASCAR to NHL. So you can join us there as well. Hit the like button before you get out of here. We'd really appreciate it. Helps us fight that algorithm. Subscribe if you haven't already, and turn that bell on so you are notified when we're live next week to talk secondary. Thanks, everybody.
Peace.